Hello everyone. So in this video I want to talk about absolute truth. Now of course it's kind of a joke, but a lot of spiritual gurus, spiritual teacher, whatever, they often use the term absolute truth. What does that mean, absolute truth? Well, let's look at the two words, absolute and truth. First of all, what does absolute means? Absolute means, well, it can mean a lot of things, but again, let's look a little bit into it. So absolute will mean something like kind of it's always the case. Let's say it's always true. It applies everywhere. It's kind of the ultimate reality. So the idea of absolute is really something that is kind of always the case. It's always like this. So it's absolute. Let's say the question is like, is space absolute? Is time absolute? The opposite of absolute will be it's relative, will mean it's only true in certain cases, but not always. So for example, I don't know, initially we thought that time was absolute in the sense that as if there was a central clock that manages time all over the universe. And then because of Einstein, we realized that it's not the case, but that time is relative. So time can go at different speed in different parts of the universe. It doesn't always move at the same speed. So we realized that time was not absolute, but that it was relative. Every time some kind of spiritual guru talks about something being absolute, we have to be very, very careful, because probably, actually, certainly it's bullshit. Because how can we know that something is absolute? I mean, it's by definition impossible. So you may believe that it's absolute until you're proven wrong. So we used to believe intuitively, it seems logical, the idea that time is absolute, that there is a central clock in the universe and that time just unfolds. Intuitively, it seems to make sense. So people believe that time is absolute. Then they realize that it's not, that it's relative. But absolute is more like an assumption. You assume that it's absolute until you realize that it's not. Or let's say Newtonian physics, we assume that they were always true, that they were an absolute, they were true all across the universe, but they are not. In certain circumstances, like high gravity or very high speeds, then Newtonian physics don't work. Again, how can we know that something is absolute? We may not have found an exception yet, so it seems that it's always the case, until we find an exception. Then once we find an exception, we realize that it's not absolute, but it's relative to something. So sometimes it happens, sometimes it doesn't happen. So that's the idea. So absolute, how can you know for sure that something is absolute? You would basically have had to have explored all of the universe, all of the possibilities, everything, which is by definition impossible. You will have to know everything to know that something is absolute. Why would you assume that something is absolute? How can you know? I like to make this example. It's a little bit stupid, but it's funny. So let's say, what if it's a dream? What if we are in a dream and then we wake up from the dream, but actually we are still dreaming that we woke up, it's another dream, and then actually, even when we wake up from that dream, it's just we are in a simulation, and the simulation is in another dream, which is a simulation, and it's like, which maybe is some simulation on some alien planet, of some dream of some alien. I mean, and you can just keep doing this. It's like maybe we are in a dream that is in a simulation, that is in a dream, in a simulation, in a dream. How can we ever say that something is absolute? It doesn't make any sense. We have no idea. It's like if you're in a small box and it's completely closed. We are in the small box and we think this box is the absolute. But then we get out of the small box and now we were just in a box and now there is a bigger box around. That's the absolute. But then we escape that box and we're like, oh, that was just a box. Here is the absolute. The new box is the absolute. And every time we do that, the new box is the absolute, but we never know when is the last box, because wherever we are in could always be a box. Even if we open it and we think, that's it, we could at any point realize that that was a box. So it sounds like reality, seems like reality, but then at some point we say, wait, this is not reality, it's a dream, and we wake up. But when you wake up, you don't know if it's ultimate reality, or it's a simulation or a dream or whatever, some box of some kind. You don't know. So how can we ever talk about absolutes? We can never talk about absolute because we never have any idea of, let's say, what's outside this box. And it's probably another box. And we don't have any idea of what's outside that other box, etc., etc., etc. So we never really know what's outside those boxes. And how can we know that we are finally in the ultimate reality, whatever that means? The absolute one. It may exist, but how do you know you are in there? Maybe there is a million boxes first, and you're in box 53. How do you know? You don't know that you're in box 53 until you reach box 54. So, whatever. So, absolute, every time someone uses the word absolute, you should run. It means it's just bullshit. Every time someone, like especially a spiritual guru, whatever, every time someone uses the word absolute, you should run. Everything they are saying is bullshit. So, what about the word truth? Well, what is truth? So, truth usually gets some idea of some mystical thing, of something that actually exists, of something that is to be found, like a small treasure. Here is this treasure of the absolute truth. Let's open and look at it. Look at it. This absolute truth. We understood already that absolute is nonsense, but let's look at truth. So, what is truth? Truth is not an object. It's not something that you can put in a box. It's not something real. It's not something to be found. There is no truth to be found. What is truth? Well, truth is basically accurately describing reality. So let's say there is a cat sitting on the couch, and I can state there is a cat sitting on the couch, and it's the truth. It's the truth to the extent that it represents reality. Now, it's not absolute. Is there really a cat? Or maybe it's a dream, or it's a simulation? Yeah, I see a cat. Relative to my experience, that's the only thing we can use, by the way, because what do we know about the rest? So relative to my experience, and not absolute, relative to my experience, there is a cat on the couch. Now, if there is a dog, and I say there is a cat, I'm lying, and so it's not the truth. But if there is a cat, and I say there is a cat, then it's the truth. Is it the absolute truth? Maybe it's a dream, maybe it's a simulation. So we can never use the word absolute. Anyone that uses the word absolute is just saying bullshit. But can we use the word truth? Well, yes. I mean, if there is a cat sitting on the couch, there is a cat sitting on the couch. The truth is usually just a representation of reality, is a description of reality. I am describing reality. I see a cat on the couch, and I'm describing reality. Usually we are simplifying it because we are missing a lot of the details. What is the color of the cat? How big is it? Is it male or female? Is it young or old? Is it healthy or sick? You could even go to describing the position of every single atom in that cat. There is reality, which is whatever is or whatever we experience. And then truth is just describing reality in the most accurate way. If the truth is not a replacement for reality, it's just the act or the qualification of describing reality properly. There is reality, and we describe it. So we see a cat, and we say there is a cat on the couch. And it's true. But truth is not something, some object. It's not something to be found. It's not even something to be realized. What is to be realized is that the stories are just stories, and we drop them. So it's a negative process. So we realize that certain things we believe to be true are false, and so we drop them. We realize what is wrong, and we remove it. There is no such thing as realizing some truth, some sort of absolute truth. How can we ever do that? Because truth is just a description of reality. If it's very close to reality, it's a very good description, then it's very true. If it's very far away from reality, it's a bad description, then it's less true, or it's not true. So, truth is just in how well you describe reality. But it's always relative to your experience anyway. So I see a cat on the couch, and I say there is a cat on the couch, is the truth, so it's true. But it's also relative, because maybe it's a dream, so maybe there is no couch, it's just me dreaming. But I cannot know, because I don't have access to the absolute. I only have access to my experience. In my experience, there is a cat on the couch. So I say there is a cat on the couch, and that's the truth. So the truth is just properly representing reality. It's nothing else. It's the truth to the extent that I am properly representing reality. The truth is not something to be found. It's not something to be realized. There is no truth to find, and there is no truth to realize, and there is no point talking in absolute. It's just bullshit. So when someone talks about absolute, about truth, even worse about absolute truth, it's just absolute bullshit. That's what it is. Absolute truth is absolute bullshit. So every time you hear the word absolute, every time you hear the word truth, even worse if you hear them together, you should just run. It means this guy is just saying bullshit. How can you know what is the absolute? You only have your experience. You don't know in how many boxes your experience is contained. Maybe it's a dream in a dream in a dream in a dream. How do you know? Absolute doesn't make any sense, or at least you can never know if it's absolute. No one can. And truth, they give you the idea that it's kind of some precious thing to be found. But there is no truth to found. It's not an object that you found. It's not something. Truth is just accurately describing reality. Absolute truth, stay away from anyone that uses those words.